You like this haircut? Barbershops aren't open where I live, but my mom did a pretty decent job for the time being. What does this have to do with Plastic Beach? Absolutely nothing, by the way. Espero que te guste este, Sebastián. ¡Vámonos! Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Christened Music Podcast, where if it's listenable, it's Christenable. I'm your host, Chris Martins. Today, we are going to take a look at the Gorillaz album, Plastic Beach. Now, before we begin, you may be wondering why I'm in different clothes, very snazzy 21 Pilots clothes. Well, turns out, I realized just as I was finished editing the audio for this very podcast, I forgot to record an intro, and I was very, very mad to find this out. So, with that said, I'll have the younger, more naive version of myself carry the rest of this review along. Take it away. This is the third album from animated rock band The Gorillaz, and it recently came under Best Gorillaz Album talks in a way that only its predecessor, Demon Days, had done before. I haven't heard that album yet, so that's a story for another time. But back to the topic at hand. I like Plastic Beach very much, so I think it's a strong contender as I build my opinion on Best Gorillaz Album. I only listened to the Now Now before this, as well as whatever singles and music videos came down the pipeline, including songs from this very album. Production sounds nice and full, with every instrument being able to come to the fore, even if vocals don't always do that. Effects can get really creative, and they give this record more of a personality. Composition is nice and lush, with lots of instruments given lots to do, even with synths running the show. This album flows really well too, even if it's not the most cohesive album in the world. Speaking of cohesion, lyrics are great. Guests always show up, and 2D is a nice calming presence to the madness of this album. The story itself is kind of all over the place at first glance, but then I realized humans don't just pollute the environment, but themselves. This album is quite heavy on the literal pollution of the earth, but also touches on how we pollute ourselves and others, and how we should maybe put a stop to that as well. Overall, very, very solid record from the Gorillaz. Plastic Beach has some great production that just adds so much personality and flavor to this record. These grating synths are really high in the mix, which adds to that plastic synthetic feeling that just overwhelms you from beginning to end. Even with these overwhelming synths, bass is actually very audible, deliciously so on Superfast Jellyfish, selling the groove of that song really well. Speaking of the groove of Superfast Jellyfish, drums sound punchy, which I like with those nice snares, whether analog or digital. Rhinestone Eyes does both very well. Vocal production is a bit inconsistent, however. The vocal mixing kind of falters at the beginning with White Flag, Broken, and a bit of Welcome to the World of the Plastic Beach. I'm sorry, Snoop Dogg. I don't like the sound of plosives on this album, which is rich given how many I keep in this podcast. I'm sorry for doing that, by the way. I'm very sorry, Uncle. Effects are super important to this record and how it operates. Reverb on Albarn or 2D's voice is crucial in building the vibe of his character, as well as that radio filter on his voice. I don't know if it's his accent or the effects on his voice or both, but the line Pirate Jet on the song Pirate Jet just makes the whole track go boing, because it's just like a bouncy, bouncy thing. Pirate Jet, Pirate Jet, Pirate Jet, Pirate Jet. It makes for a groovy, bouncy way to end the whole album. Effects and Plastic Beach, and basically Gorillaz music as a whole, they go together like peanut butter and jelly. In fact, reverb on this whole album is used really well everywhere with everything. Panning is not non-existent, but it's just not obvious. With vocals, the stereo sound is used to add some layers, like on Sweepstakes, especially with the echo on the word Sweepstakes. With instruments, the same kind of goes here, with different instruments chilling in different channels, with very little in the way of panning. But with all of that, this album has a very well-rounded sound, if not one that jumps at you right away like an OK computer would. But that's astronomically high standards. It is, however, full of personality, and it contributes to the unique sound of Gorillaz music very well. Composition is very lush and full of things to enjoy. This record immediately greets us with the orchestral opening and very full sounding strings, which are very pretty whenever they show up throughout the whole album, not just this intro. Speaking of orchestras, I really like the Arabic orchestra on White Flag. They're super fun and they make this song unique. The bass is super fun and provides a nice backbone for everyone else while showing off like on Stylo with that killer bass line. Murdoch, you're a genius for this one. The drums have this sound that always works with the song. There are both acoustic drums and drum machines, which songs like Rhinestone Eyes change effortlessly between. The pianos on Empire Ants in particular are perfect, and they just flow through you like water. It's just so calming, so relaxing. The whole song is just perfect. The clunky brass on Sweepstakes, yes, I love that song too, adds more to the madness of this song. It's like they're coming at you like the rest of the song, just about to attack you, you know? But the real star of the show is the synths. Hell, they name drop Casio, likely for the synth that they use this album on the title track. There's a lot of this harsh synth sound, such as on Glitter Freeze, that sounds oppressive, cold, plastic, if you will. These synths are everywhere, and they are responsible for a more unified sound from the record. Speaking of a unified sound, this album is not nearly as cohesive as I thought it would be, but it's still fairly cohesive. The structure of the songs are pretty common, but the songs themselves are good enough for me not to care.
I'll let you in on a little secret. If the song's good enough, I won't care if it happens to do something different with its structure. And I'm not sure anyone else outside of the most pretentious jazz theremin player would either.
On Melancholy Hill is one of those simpler songs that I have loved for years, but pay attention to the end with that bell that brings the song from a D major to a D minor chord. It's just jarring enough to grab your attention, but it fits perfectly well with the song. Sorry for the theory spiel. Let's move on. Also, the transition from the quiet part of Empire Ants to the fast part makes me feel like I'm traveling through the universe at the speed of light, just watching all the planets and stars just whizzing past me. Speaking of transitions, there are a few of them between songs that just work. Coming back to Empire Ants, the song before that one, Superfast Jellyfish, has these falling hard synths that beautifully lead into the first synth note of Empire Ants. Also, the transition from orchestral intro to Welcome to the World of the Plastic Beach is great, and it's a nice starting point for the musical tension. There are fewer transitions in the back half of this record, but they are going for a collection of songs thing more than an actual cohesive unit of a record. Although they do a bit of that on Cloud of Unknowing and Pirate Jet, so that's pretty cool. There are often bangers with those aggressive synths, but you also have the On Melancholy Hills and the Empire Ants on this record to break that up, which is a very, very needed cool down. It's not as cohesive as I would have thought, but this album still flows quite nicely. Speaking of flows, this album has some good ones. Let's start with the man behind the musical madness, for the most part, Damon Albarn. The voice of Damon Albarn, otherwise known as 2D, is shy and reserved, which is the trademark 2D style. It really speaks to 2D's character, especially as a chill foil to the rowdy Murdoch, but you already know that if you're a Gorillaz fan. Here on Plastic Beach, Damon Albarn uses this reserved voice for a variety of emotions such as dejection and hopelessness on Rhinestone Eyes, lightness on Melancholy Hill, and Empire Ants. Then he adds a little bit more firepower on Pirate Jet to close out this record with a bang. Snoop Dogg's voice on Welcome to the World of Plastic Beach is a very calming presence to help ease us into this album. Bashy and Kano on White Flag are in your face and fun with their verses, even if it's a bit contradictory to the peace and love vibes, but whatever. De La Soul is super expressive and fun on Superfast Jellyfish.
Oh, that's chicken.
Lou Reed's voice on Some Kind of Nature is dusty and cool, which really makes the song pop with the production. Little Dragon is one of my favorite collaborators on here, with her powerful vocals on Empire Ants through the faster and synth-led section. She also knows how to go smooth onto Binge, which pairs really nicely with Albarn's equally smooth vocals. Of course, Bobby Womack's contributions are really worth mentioning with the calming cloud of Unknowing and the passionate lines on Stylo. And speaking of Stylo, one of the most important people who is not part of the Gorillaz band proper, who shows up on this album, is none other than Mos Def. His bridge on Stylo sets the tone for the song really, really well. But his masterpiece would have to be Sweepstakes, with the unnerving flow of this song, which is only enhanced by the beat behind him. Every time he goes, Sweepstakes! Just kicks me deeper down into the abyss of madness on this song. Oh my God! As for lyrical analysis, it's not as easy to decipher as environmental album stamp. 75% of this album is explicitly about environmental pollution, yes, but there's at least 25% of this album that isn't explicitly about the environment at all. This comes at a cost of a watertight, cohesive narrative, but I do admire how Plastic Beach tries not to write itself into a corner. Starting with these environmental tracks, it is a biting critique of our throwaway society and its consequences leading to a dirtier planet, which will someday kill us all. You got tracks like Rhinestone Eyes that assert that this beautiful modern world is not as naturally beautiful as it would have you believe. Superfast Jellyfish critiques our throwaway society as well as the music industry, as it argues that consumers of food and music are more concerned with what is quick and easy as opposed to what is substantive, which in turn poisons not only the actual sea, but the sea of music out there. If you're picking up what I'm putting down here, Plastic Beach is an album about pollution, both literal and abstract. We are both polluting the earth and ourselves with the way we do things. For example, To Binge is a song about alcoholism and how it is not only poisoning their bodies and minds, but the two protagonists' relationship. But there is a glimmer of hope in this album to break up the doom and gloom. Empire Ants and On Melancholy Hill are not just beautiful tracks compositionally, but lyrically as well. Empire Ants at first reassures us that it'll all be alright when the empire of the modern world falls, and then tells us to break out of that monotonous cycle. On Melancholy Hill is among the most optimistic on this record, I find. It is a pretty love song which criticizes society, but in a way that sees two lovers leaving this plastic beach behind. Leaving that island of plastic in the ocean behind. Leaving a plastic world behind. Riding off into the sunset. It's beautiful. For an album about pollution and condemning it, Plastic Beach is a rather cleansing, refreshing listen. Gorillaz' Plastic Beach is a good record. It is a record that perhaps is even more poignant today than it was 10 years ago, as the climate crisis has greatly intensified and there are larger plastic islands in the ocean. The production is rock solid, and it has a personality that could only be attributed to Damon Albarn and the Gorillaz. The instrumental production is fantastic, but I feel like the vocal production could be better. Effects are amazing at building the personality of this album. 2D's voice is notable, but all the other instruments get some love to enhance their role in the record. Speaking of instruments, composition has a lot to work with, and it makes for a lushly arranged album with these filthy mechanical synths leading the charge. It makes for a diverse group of well-arranged songs that are sequenced in a way that keeps this album interesting. The transitions at the front especially are amazing. As for vocals, 2D's shy vocals are calming and add a chiller angle to this album. Not one collaborator on this album is bad. Not one! They all show up and make this album great, particularly Mos Def. As for the lyrics themselves, this is an album that is a loose concept tied to pollution. And I think that it explores this theme in a very creative way by not just talking about environmental pollution, but more abstract pollution as we bring more negative things into our lives that pollute us. Plastic Beach is a great album all around, and like Arcade Fire's The Suburbs that came out in the same year, it might have signaled the end of an era for Gorillaz as we know it, as both bands' first 3 albums are the ones everyone talks about and loves, and anything that came after that just isn't as good. I am very scared to review Reflector. Very scared. If I find that this is true, at least I'll have this album to fall back on. I'm giving this one a strong 8 out of 10. Today's episode is sponsored by no one but me.
It's time to chill.
I hope you enjoyed this review of Gorillaz' Plastic Beach. Thank you all so much for listening and watching. Let me know your thoughts on this record in the comments below. If you like hearing me talk music and do music, subscribe to the Martelins music channel and hit the bell so you never miss anything I put out. If you want to see more of me and my musical endeavors, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Martelins Music. If you want strictly review-related content, follow at Christened Music on Instagram. If you want all of that in the kitchen sink, including blogs, music, the whole shebang, you can check out my website at martelinsmusic.wixsite.com/music. And before I leave you, I have music of my own that I am anxious to share with you, and it sounds just a little like...